Oh yeah. And don't worry, there's not going to be a repeat of the DNF review where they're going to accidentally go... Duke Nukem got his start in two PC side-scrollers developed by Apogee Software. They're largely forgettable and doesn't exactly represent the direction the franchise would take in the seminal third entry. That, of course, being the iconic Duke Nukem 3D, which released 30 years ago on the 29th of January 1996. Why didn't this review come out on that date? Well, I got a really evil cold and lost my voice for a couple of weeks. Imagine that. The world went without these golden pipes for 2 whole weeks. Tragic. Duke Nukem himself is an archetypal 80s male action hero, amped up to the extreme, and in Duke Nukem 3D, they managed to outdo themselves with arguably the most stereotypical embodiment of all these traits. His name has a curious story behind it. Apogee first went with the name we've all come to recognise, but realised that it was already taken by a villain from the Captain Planet cartoon. So they changed the surname to be spelled as Nukem. Fortunately, the devs realised that the Captain Planet character's name hadn't actually been trademarked, so they were free to stick with their original. Apogee dubbed themselves as 3D Realms for their three-dimensional games, the first being Duke Nukem 3D, which released during the early years of the FPS genre, 3 years after Doom and 2 before Half-Life, both going on to define the genre in the 90s. And Duke 3D is undeniably among those and other titles as one of the greatest first-person shooters of not only the 90s, but of all time. Diverging from the side-scrolling action of the prior entries, 3D caters towards a more mature audience, although mature might not be the correct word. Duke 3D was revolutionary for its time. Not for its graphics, but for its environments. They're large and interactive, with verticality unlike anything that came before. Certainly blows Rise of the Triad out of the water, and may even surpass the upcoming Quake. The locations you explore were designed to be as realistic as possible, not something titles of the mid-90s were overly concerned with. The verticality here is yet to be topped by any other FPS. The jetpack was truly a game changer. It can feel like cheating though when using it to bypass large chunks of level, but at the same time it does feel good to have your outside-the-box thinking be rewarded. There's a large variety of weapons and items. The gimmick ones are especially fun to use, namely the freeze thrower and my favourite gun in the game, the shrinker. Yet again, Duke's arsenal is unlike anything that came before. Contemporary FPS games of the era had a fairly standard library of weapons that shot simple projectiles that either gradually wore enemies down or jibbed them. But in Duke 3D, you can freeze them and smash them to pieces, or shrink and crush them beneath his mighty boot. Oh yeah, mighty boot. Melee was commonplace in FPS games of the era, but Duke 3D was ahead of the curve by having the melee existing concurrent with your readied weapon. This obviously being how melee functions now, not requiring you to holster your gun and being a separate option. Hard to believe that some considered Duke 3D to be outdated and outmoded in the graphics department. Listing all the things the game did made me realise how ahead of its time it was. The weapon sprite not being centred and positioned to the right is reminiscent of what we see today. The reloading of certain weapons like the pistol was also uncommon at the time. Sound design is great and quite disturbing. The roars and screams of the invading Cycloid Empire's forces are super grotesque. The garbled death rattle of the standard foot soldiers and the haunting, otherworldly screams of the Octobrains. Seriously, the Octobrains still freak me out. I hate being stuck in close quarters with these nightmares. I just love how the Cycloids are so evil and really encapsulate that evil alien stereotype. It helps instill me with much glee when I use a pipe bomb to blow them into little red jibs.
Let God sort 'em out.
The game was evidently attuned to the 90s alien invasion zeitgeist, reminding me a lot of Independence Day and Men in Black. Now, I've certainly raved about the game for a while, but that doesn't mean Duke Nukem 3D is a flawless game. There's a few too many hit-scan enemies, such as the pig cops, overlords, and the worst offenders being the enforcers, which are, in essence, marginally less frustrating chain gunners from Doom 2. Not being able to save the babes is such a colossal misfire. It's just mean-spirited. The N64 version's overboard censorship actually rectifies this by having Duke teleport them out of their cocoons to safety. That's much better. I hate killing them so much that I actively try to avoid doing so. There's zero reason to kill them in-game. You're not rewarded with ammo or items, nothing. Duke himself is a rubbish character. He's creepy. It's hard to tell if that was the point or not, since Duke Nukem Forever treats the character with the utmost respect, and everyone in the game thinks he's the bee's knees. Maybe the biggest issue is that he's brutally unoriginal. All of his most iconic lines are stolen, like
"Hail to the king, baby."
Is stolen from Army of Darkness, and Bruce Campbell apparently wasn't too impressed when he found out.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Is ripped from Roddy Piper's character in They Live. And his design is dumb. So no, I don't have much love for the Duke. Give me Master Chief or Caleb from Blood any day. Much like other PC FPS games of the era, Duke Nukem 3D was episodic, the first episode being released as shareware, the remaining 2 episodes available for purchase, each culminating with a boss fight. So let's take a look at these 3 episodes and see how the game evolves. Episode 1, LA Meltdown, gets off on the right foot. Hollywood Holocaust is likely the best opening level to any FPS game ever made. It can be beaten in any variety of ways. Playing in a linear fashion, or having your intimate knowledge of the game rewarded and blasting through the level in seconds by taking advantage of the secret rocket launcher and jetpack. Oh, and notice the billboard here, that being a reference to the O.J. Simpson trial, which was ongoing during development. Level 2 has yet another O.J. reference with a pixelated rendition of the white Ford Bronco during the low-speed chase O.J. led police on throughout Los Angeles. Oh, and who's this in the corner?
Shake it, baby.
No, Duke, that's not a stripper, that's Jill Valentine. Oh! LA Meltdown may peak a little too early with those first 2 levels. Death Row is pretty great, but Toxic Dump doesn't have much going for it, outside of the underwater and shrink ray stuff, which was fairly novel for the time. The Abyss is a decent final level, although I got stuck for a while because I hadn't triggered some environmental shifting, which meant I couldn't progress. Not sure if that's an issue exclusive to Raze or Duke 3D in general. Yeah, I'm using the Raze source port to play the game, which ports Duke 3D into the GZ Doom engine. I couldn't capture World Tour on PS5 at a frame rate above 30, and I don't think the eDuke 32 source port is visually appealing, so that's why I went with Raze. Plus it can play a few other games that used Ken Silverman's build engine.
Nobody steals our chicks and lives.
Episode 2, Lunar Apocalypse, takes Duke to the final frontier. Lunar Apocalypse catches a lot of flack from fans, but I think it's the most underrated episode of Duke 3D. Sure, the defense drones are introduced here and are the most irritating enemies in the game, but weapons like the Shrinker, Freeze Thrower, and Devastator, which are iconic to the game, make their first appearances in this episode. It does seem a shame to move away from the urban environments of the first episode and replace them with the somewhat uninspired space station you'd see in other FPS games, but that doesn't really detract from the consistently brilliant map design. The majority of Lunar Apocalypse's levels being built by Alan Blum, who I think is an even better map designer than Richard Level Lord Gray. Blum was also responsible for the aforementioned Hollywood Holocaust.
It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum.
Episode 3, Shrapnel City, brings Duke back to Earth and sees him battle his way through the semi-realistic urban environments that Duke Nukem 3D excels in. Likely the best of all the episodes. No notes. Good shit.
Eat shit and die.
Later in 1996, a second version of Duke Nukem 3D released called the Atomic Edition, with an all-new 4th episode named The Birth. Sadly, this is a step down in quality from the 3rd. Levels don't follow on from one another as obviously as they did in the 1st and 3rd episodes, and lots of needlessly explosive walls for little to no reason only causes frustration. The level design is at its worst in The Birth. It has 2 of the worst levels in the game, with Babeland being what I believe to be the weakest level in Duke 3D, especially with progression being halted by a puzzle so cryptic it feels like it should be a secret, and the penultimate level, derelict. Still, better level design than in Doom 2 with Sandy Peterson's shit levels. It's undoubtedly inferior to Lunar Apocalypse in my opinion. I don't enjoy it much, and it only gets worse as it goes along, ending the game on a slightly sour note. It isn't without its highlights, but the lows are in stark contrast to how fantastic the base game is. Ultimately, does Duke Nukem 3D stand the test of time 30 years later? A resounding yes. Duke 3D was revolutionary and paved the way for other FPS games to faithfully recreate real-world locations and environments. So much so that it's impossible to imagine games without the grounded realism nowadays. One of the absolute best games ever made, and the best to use Ken Silverman's build engine, which you may recognise from other classics such as Shadow Warrior and Blood. I may not like Duke as a character, but I sure do love his game. Duke Nukem 3D gets 4.5 stars out of 5. Just a shame that Duke Nukem hasn't had a very positive legacy in the following decades, with the critical lambasting of Duke Nukem Forever and Gearbox doing very little with the IP in the last 15 years. One day, we'll get a suitable follow-up to Duke Nukem 3D. Fingers crossed. Well, thanks for watching and welcome to Killbot Season 10. We're finally in double digits. Here's hoping we have another fun year of reviews.